What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we are redoing my top 16 wide receivers post-combine. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. All that really does help. We're on the way to 15K. Let's get excited because there's a lot of awesome content coming in the next couple of weeks. Let's get right into this though. Starting out, I'm going to basically tell y'all how I do my grading system because I think that matters. I could leave it in the description below, but I feel like this is just a much easier way for me to explain it. So you're going to see the 1 through 16, well, it'll be 16 through 1 rankings in the top left, but they're color coded. So essentially I have tiers 1 through 4, and that's based on what role they'll have immediately. I think that, really solid players can be at that tier 2 and move up to a tier 1. I don't think there's anybody who's going to be like a top 5 wide receiver right now coming to the NFL. I think that's almost impossible to find. So technically there is a tier above this, but that's almost generational tier. But I do think every receiver can move up an extra tier. So my tier 1 could become, a tier S, so to speak. And then tier 2, those are wide receivers that come in and they're day 2. They're not going to be the number 1 dog on their team, but they will be a very, very strong leading role. And I think they can easily become a wide receiver 1 if everything goes right. Now, wide receiver 3, that tier 3, I don't really believe that they'll ever become a true number 1 wide receiver, which, remember, there's 32 in the NFL. That's it. There's 32. So not all these guys should be able to become one of the top 32 receivers. And this would be a ridiculous class if even tier 2 guys ended up becoming tier 1. So I think that maybe the best of tier 3 still have a shot to jump multiple tiers, but essentially it is going to confine them basically floor and ceiling. I think that, a plus or minus 1 is about right. So tier 4 going to be those guys who don't really see the field. They're not going to be that starter, but they still will be getting some reps. So what's different about this specific style compared to what I did in my last receiver rankings is the it factor. You're going to see it there at the bottom of the screen. It's going to be a unique factor like red zone ability or, motor that I don't factor into my categories, which I'll explain in a second. It was something that I really felt didn't show the proper rankings that I felt were there. And it's just a great way for me to show, like, for example, we'll talk about Troy Franklin. How awfully he did on the gauntlet drill, that won't actually affect any of his numbers in terms of his categories. But that's something that needs to be factored in my opinion. So it's a way for me to slightly tweak the grades to show exactly what I think the player is going to be. And I think that's a really good addition. So feel free to let me know what your thoughts are on that. But the categories, I have 2 categories for route running. It's hard cut and 45-degree change of direction. Essentially, you're either going to be doing a harder cut or essentially a shorter cut. So it's basically showing how receivers can stop on a dime, how they can keep their speed through a 45-degree cut like a slant or a post. It essentially is route running, but split into 2 categories. Run after the catchability is self-explanatory. Separation is obviously a combination of your play speed and your route running and your physicality. It's basically, can you get open? Hands, that's pretty much going to come down to a drop percentage issue. So we're going to leave that as is. A release package is a very intricate part of the game. I know that this will be a little bit more up for contention, but usually the receivers with really good route running will have pretty solid release packages. It's very rare where you don't find those guys with good footwork after the line of scrimmage to have poor footwork on the line of scrimmage. But I think that's a lot harder to find someone who has a good release package who does not have good route running ability. Speed is a combination of top speed, like 40-yard dash time, 10-yard split, but more importantly, it's play speed. So, there are some players where I'm still going to give Xavier Worthy an A+, spoiler alert, but I don't think he plays with that 4.21 speed every single rep. So that's perfectly fine. Again, you can, vary your level of effort to make sure on the plays that you're supposed to be 100%, you're 100%. But on a general basis, are you actually playing at a much faster speed? Sometimes guys don't actually push themselves to their limits. So that also could be stuck into that it factor category. Burst is essentially explosiveness, acceleration out of a cut. That also affects separation. Versus the press. I think this is a key one that not many very good receivers end up being able to, or not very many receivers that are not talented can handle. Like, you have to handle the press in the NFL. These corners are sticky, and if you cannot, if you get knocked off your route, if you end up not being able to have enough physicality to be able to handle a defender, then you are essentially going to be taken out of plays, and NFL is not going to be a big fan of you. Contested catch, self-explanatory. You're just going to go up and get it. And then blocking. That is a new category into this whole entire system. It was in my last receiver rankings, but it is what shifted a lot of my scale. Thank you to Romo Dwan for making me really want to show appreciation to blocking, because even though it's going to be only 5% of my grading scale, that still could shift a receiver from, spot 9 up to spot 4. That's how big of a shift it could be if they're a good blocker and somebody else is not. Let's get into this. I already know some jackass is going to say the real video starts right now, and that's okay. The real video starts right now. Starting out at number 16, I will say I have to put an honorable mention. Roman Wilson, someone who I really, really like. This is just a very good receiver class. Like, we have probably 20 receivers. I could have tossed Javon Baker in here, Tez Walker. Like, these dudes are actually very good players. So no shade to them at all. We're talking about all these players should be going. Like, they have the talent to be a top 100 player in any class. Same thing with Roman Wilson. Again, same thing with Javon Baker, Tez Walker, etc. So no shade to them at all. Just because they're not on this list does not mean I don't like them. It's just a really good class. Jermaine Burton, someone who is on this list because I have faith in him bouncing back from, he's proven to be a little bit of a shithead in the locker room. Now, as someone who went to Oaks Christian High School, he went to Calabasas, which is one of our rivals, I obviously kind of, get a little bit of a little nose up in the air, so to speak, when a Calabasas boy doesn't do as well as maybe you'd think. But obviously, I hope that he makes his money. I hope he proves me wrong, because he was a top 32 guy of mine all year long. The more I ended up watching him, the more I started seeing these cracks in the personality and the inconsistencies and the lack of effort. So that's why I did do a 3- on the it factor. And not every player is going to have an it factor. I have to put that out there. It's really designed for the players where I feel the grading system itself doesn't explain their game well enough. It's not like, oh my God, I thought that, like Marvin Harrison Jr. just needed 2 extra points, so I'm going to give him 2 extra points. No, it's like, okay, well, I feel like his fluidity and maybe his play was a little bit dumbed down. So Jermaine Burton, it's a 3- because I have major issues with his motor. I know he has so much more potential than this because he can run 45-degree cuts, but he just doesn't want to. So I'm really hoping that he has an opportunity to be a better version of himself. I think he'll be a day 3 pick because, again, there is that stigma that he was kind of a shithead in the locker room, which is very unfortunate, but it was proven throughout his whole entire play. I'm not going to go through every single category because you can read, but again, hands is going to come down to a percentage. He is extremely, extremely reliable. And he was a multi-year starter. He has really damn good speed in that 4.4 range, very explosive as well. It is what it is. And something I will say about my grading scale, a C and up is good. A B is really solid. A B+, my God, you are really damn good. A's are almost impossible to find unless you're in the hands because, again, it comes down to a percentage. So got to put that out there as well. My grading system seems a little bit harsh, but I want to make sure that we give credit to those who will make an impact in the NFL rather than just be a guy who's fringe on the roster. Jaylen Polk, he actually ended up going up 1 spot because of the it factor category. He didn't end up getting a it factor. I'm not really going to explain why I don't give certain players it factors. I just feel like this is a solid grade for Jaylen Polk. I think he's not very nuanced as a route runner. You see that in his tape. He's able to go up and get it, which is awesome. And I think that his hands are very solid. And one of the things I love about Washington, they're all very damn good blockers. But, he's a solid athlete. He proved that through a very nice vertical jump, broad jump, and then honestly, not a very surprising and great 40, but nothing underwhelming. Like, it was just low 4.5s, which, the 4.5 is the new 4.6. Everybody needs to get under that in order to be loved. But I think he's going to be perfectly fine. He's going to be a really solid wide receiver 4 that I think he's the first guy on the fringe of being a true wide receiver 3. I just don't know if I'm ready to roll him out day 1 and have him become that true wide receiver 3. But a team like the Eagles, I think he'd be a great fit on. So he's one of the first guys who could be in that tier 3 range. But for right now, he'll be in my tier 4. And, I don't really feel like I need to explain the dream fits too much. Essentially, I'll talk about the player because it just, you can decipher why I end up loving them to their specific teams. And now here at number 14, this is going to be a little bit of a hot topic, but we got Malachi Corley. I really, really like Malachi Corley. I'll just come out and say it. He is a very, very good wide receiver. And he just fits a very specific role. He is a little bit on the shorter side, sub 6 foot, 215. Actually, a little bit more of a running back build. When you look at his strengths and weaknesses, kind of feels like a little bit of a running back. And a lot of people really do think that as well. I'm not there to where I'm actually going to put him at a running back position, but I do know the role where I really want him to play is essentially a more refined role of Rashee Rice on the Chiefs. So Raw is someone who's really fluid with the ball in his hands, but he also has a little bit more of that pure full receiver ability because he is, in that 6'1" to 6'2" range. And I think that extra size does have a little bit more of an opening of the role. Malachi Corley, I think he is that wide receiver 3 guy on a team where, essentially if a team wants to throw a screen to him or just get the ball in space, this guy's going to be unbelievable. Talk about jet sweeps. Like there's a lot that Malachi can do in the NFL. I think his route running is still very nuanced, but, it's adequate. It's just not there yet. And I think it could totally develop, but he's not really going to do that at Western Kentucky the way that maybe we would want him to. His speed overall, though, very, very solid. I don't have any issues with him as an athlete. He just feels very fluid in space, but just maybe not as refined as, one would want coming into the NFL. I'm not going to tell Steve Smith that he's wrong by any stretch. I feel like Steve Smith knows wide receivers a little bit better than I do as a former NFL wide receiver. However, Malachi Corley is more of a post-draft analysis as to how damn good he's going to be because you have to see the role that he's going to play. Yes, you can say that about every wide receiver, but I feel like him specifically, you'll need to see the team and the offense he's going into to see how successful he'll be more than maybe some other players in this class because of how role specific he will be and how that offense uses said role. Going on to number 13, we got Troy Franklin here, and he's the reason I have the ain't factor. So we have the it factor and the ain't factor. Got to give a shout out to one of my subs. They ended up commenting that on a video. I love it. So I debated trying to put it as a it/ain't factor. I feel like a negative it factor gets that point across. After, seeing Puka Nacua create so much validity to, create a little bit more respect for their gauntlet drill, it really does have more of a weight on my heart, so to speak, when I see a player that just either doesn't take it seriously or is just extremely uncomfortable. Like that's a very, very much a playing position right there. Like you are running full speed, catching passes in stride, and you need to be able to adjust to poor balls being thrown because these are not NFL quarterbacks, so to speak. And he looked extremely uncomfortable. He couldn't stay in a straight line. He looked like he was drawing the damn Mississippi River. Sorry, buddy. That's not the rules of the game. So maybe if he knew that, he might have done it better. But I feel like he did. So either he purposely didn't care about the drill or he just wasn't prepared for it. Am I overanalyzing it? Maybe, but it only creates a 3% impact on the grade. So I'm going to make sure I mitigate my actual feelings and keep this a lot more based on what the actual tape says. Because in general, the tape is solid. He has all the route running and release intricacy that you could want. Like maybe he could stop on a dime a little bit more by sinking down to his hips, but it is what it is. I think that you're not going to be going to him as that surefire guy. Maybe he's just MVS. He might be a little better than MVS, but MVS has kind of gotten a lot of excuses over his time. A lot of people hate on him, but I mean, he's still, I think the NFL gives him way too many free chances, like another chance. And then, to be fair, he won a Super Bowl, power to him. But essentially, this is going to be a better version of MVS because I think he's a better route runner. And overall, he's just going to be a better player. So Troy Franklin, I'm hoping he has a bounce back. That's why the it/ain't factor is there because I feel like that is easier to fix than probably anything else. A lot of times it comes down to blocking prowess, motor concerns, and then, red zone proficiency. And, that's something that's relatively easier to tweak than your ability to handle press. So I think a team like the Tennessee Titans would absolutely love him in the slot. And, obviously the other teams, it speaks for themselves. At number 12, we got Xavier Legette. I love Xavier Legette. He is somebody that I have undying respect for because he ended up coming out of nowhere. He had a really good game back in 2022. I think I'm forgetting if it was versus Georgia or LSU, but starting this year, Juice Wells was the number 1 wide receiver coming into the year, and he hurts his ankle. All of a sudden, Xavier Legette takes off. And without that injury, I don't think we would actually be thinking about Xavier Legette in the mindset that we do. He got extremely famous for how fast he was at 6'3", 227. Turns out he's 6'1", 219. Oh, that's so much worse. I mean, yeah, you'd like a couple extra inches and maybe an extra 10 pounds in there. But, it is what it is. Like, he still has a great frame. 6'1", 220 is not something to scoff at. So, really good job. I mean, obviously tested out like a freak. I'm a big fan of that. He was one of my fastest guys. He actually plays faster than the majority of all receivers as well, which is something I respect. I think he's a little too inconsistent in terms of his route running. He has some beautiful reps, and I just don't see it on a down-to-down basis where he's actually being able to put in that proper technique to get open. But he has great speed for it. He has shown the flashes of it. For me, that is very much enough to take him in the second round, which wide receiver 12 in the second round. Hello. like it's a real deal. Like, this class is awesome. But I do have my one issue with him. That's blocking. He does not block. He doesn't like to block. It's just a big issue with me. It's 5% of my grading scale, so it's actually not very effective on the overall grade. But it is sometimes what makes the difference between Xavier Legette being number 9 on my board and number 12. It really is that big of a difference, because I think he would end up being number 9 if he did not end up being a little bit of a pansy, so to speak, in terms of the run game. But I do give him a +2 because I think I have seen enough in terms of his inconsistency to where I feel like it's almost his inexperience that causes the inconsistency more than actual, effort issues. But again, I got to knock him a little bit for that blocking. Also makes some of the most amazing catches that I've seen. So big shout out to Xavier Legette. At pick number 11, we got Xavier Worthy, another player who I'm not a huge fan of his blocking, but there's something that has to be said for that game-breaking speed. A lot of people might get pissed off because Xavier Worthy should be higher on my list. You know what? If somebody moves up significantly on your board after they run a really fast 40, did you not think that he was fast before? I mean, I had him as a B+ speed because I don't think he plays with consistent speed 24/7. That's my only issue with it, is that his play speed's not 4.21, but he does reach those speeds on some certain plays. So I ended up deciding, hey, you know what? I'll give him credit where credit's due. He's tested out there. We'll give him that. And, hence why he's there. He's a really solid prospect overall, but I know he's had some issues with, I think he had a broken finger, so that might have led to a little bit of a worse hand situation. But, overall, I am quite unimpressed with his separation ability at that speed, right? I feel like he should be separating a little bit more because he's honestly a solid route runner as well. So, I have those issues with him, but at the same time, he is a really good prospect. I'm being nitpicky because I'm just being nitpicky. We might as well at this point. He's 165 pounds at 6'1". Not everybody's going to be Tank Dell or the Slim Reaper. There's a reason why there's exceptions to a rule, because there's a rule in place. And there's only a couple people who become the exception. It's not the rule. So being that frame, very well could knock Xavier Worthy down boards. Again, 4.21. Awesome. I love that. It's just, did you not think he was a 4.2 guy before? If you didn't, why not? Shouldn't really change your opinion of him. And for me, it just adjusted the score a little bit. Didn't change my opinion of Xavier Worthy. So next we got Brenden Rice. So he ended up boosting up a little bit in terms of speed and burst. He had both of those at an F the last time before the combine. And I'm praying to God that this shows great work ethic over the offseason to become a better athlete, because I really thought he was going to be maybe 4.7 in the 40-yard dash, and he ends up being a 4.51. That's awesome. I did not expect that at all. So the fact that he's able to prove that, let's see if it translates to the game. If it does, I'm willing to put him into that tier 2, because I think he could be a number 2 wide receiver if he plays at that 4.5 speed consistently. Not really crazy on the explosiveness drills, and that shows up on tape. Still doesn't generate separation that well, but the intricacy of his release package is phenomenal. Whether it's at the line, dealing with press down the field, he really does know how to be able to position himself properly to give himself the best chance for success. That is a big win in my books. So I'm going to give that to him right there. That's going to be my little +1 right there, because I do think that there's a lot to his motor that is spoken to, whether it's on the field with his blocking or in the offseason with showing all that extra athleticism that he brought at still a great frame at 6'2", 212. Now, I have Isaiah Pacheco with a star there for his comp because he runs like really angrily, similar to Isaiah Pacheco. Like Pacheco looks like he's like punching the ground with his feet. Same thing with Brenden Rice. He runs routes a very similar way. So big fan of that. Brenden Rice is somebody who I thoroughly believe could be, if I had to pick two guys who could eventually become number one wide receivers on their team, like the guys who could jump 2 tiers, it's Brenden Rice and Xavier Legette. So, I do believe that teams that should be looking for that bigger frame receiver who does have that unique ability to position themselves properly, they're going to love him. So we'll see if he actually can end up jumping those 2 tiers. Now we got Ricky Pearsall at number 9. Obviously, Ricky is an awesome player. He has some crazy catches over the middle of the field. There's just a lot to really like about Ricky Pearsall. Ricky is overall like a really, really solid player. Maybe I should boost his burst score up just a little bit. Like maybe that could be a B- to a B. His explosiveness drills certainly showed it. But I think the inconsistency was really what got to me. Like his high level plays are phenomenal. That's why I have him as a fringe tier 2 to tier 1, fringe tier 3 to tier 2 player. But, for me, I don't think he's there just yet to be a number 2 wide receiver on a team. I think he's going to be that third wide receiver who really needs that extra time to develop that consistency, because he has the play speed, he has the tested speed, he has the tested explosiveness, but it really is a hit or miss as to whether he's going to be going with that speed, with that burst. And that includes the plays where I thought that he should have been the primary read. But I think teams that are looking for someone at that 189 frame, he's a little bit smaller, who could fit in that slot or on the boundary. I think there's a lot of teams that would absolutely adore having that flexibility and that upside. So especially seeing a team that could have Tank Dell and Nico Collins, this is almost a perfect in between. I would love that for Ricky Pearsall. He's a great player. I don't think he gets out of the top 75 or maybe even the top 64. He's reliable. He's overall just a very consistent player in terms of the ethic of work. I just think he needs to be a little bit more consistent with his overall game itself in terms of the explosiveness, because that could be really the difference maker, in my opinion, between him being a wide receiver 2 or being a wide receiver 3 on a team. And that is, $10 to $15 million maybe on a contract, maybe even a year, if he ends up really proving his value. So fingers crossed for that, but he's a top 10 receiver. He's a great, great player. Now we go to Lad McConkey. I love Lad. Obviously, it's a picture of me and Lad below my face. I got to meet him there in Mobile. Fantastic person, fantastic player. Super chill dudes, very, very humble. I actually have an interview with Makai Muse, who was his roommate during these games when they were traveling, and that'll be up pretty damn soon. I think that might be something during the summer because he's coming out for the 2025 or 2026 draft. But really cool dude. Want to give him a quick shout out right there as well. But Lad tries a lot in blocking. I just think that, he does have a little bit of an inefficiency when it comes to blocking. He's not going to be a big threat at 6 foot 186. He's a good player though. I really do like him a lot. I think he should be primarily slot specific, but the route tree pretty damn developed. It was pretty much just him and Brock Bowers there kicking some ass there for Georgia. So I love that. He knows how to generate separation, good speed variability, release package there. Overall, fantastic. Maybe the one thing I did have a gripe with is that he's not going to be someone that you can rely on when you just say YOLO. He's not a YOLO type of player. That isn't Xavier Legette, where you can just say, like, screw it. Like, a defender's in my face. I know the receivers in this area. I'm going to throw it up. And you shouldn't throw it to someone who's 185 at 6 foot. That's not the best move. So I think there's plenty of teams that have a perfect role for Lad McConkey to be a great contributor, and I'm very excited to see what he can do. He technically was in my tier 2 last time, but I just don't know if he's ready to be a number 2 wide receiver, or essentially a consensus number 2 wide receiver on a team just yet. But he is perfectly on that fringe of 3 2. Speaking of my number 2 tier, beginning off with Keon Coleman. So he obviously had an issue with that 40 time. You will see the speed as rated much higher than a 4.6 40 would suggest. And I'll explain that in a second. But he had a 4.61 40-yard dash. Blew my mind because the thing is, his play speed is incredible. And I was like, damn, like I didn't see that on tape. All of a sudden, the gauntlet drill, he ran the fastest gauntlet, or at least one of. I think it was the fastest, but one of the fastest gauntlets. And to me, that showed that he was running at 20 miles per hour, just catching balls consistently. And super fluid the whole entire time. He just was maintaining a very high level of speed for the play. And that's why I feel comfortable keeping him at the exact same grade as before the combine, because I really do think that his overall test, the whole entire combine, was far better than what that 4.61 suggested. And it looked a lot faster when he was actually trusting himself in game speed. That to me kept it there. So, play speed, obviously you talked about how Puka Nacua was the fastest guy last year. So there's going to be, because NFL is a very trendy league, there's going to be a focus on that gauntlet speed as well. So I'm very excited to see how much that factors in to Keon Coleman's overall grade. Top speed, not there, but you're not using this guy to take the top off of defense. Very underrated after the catch as well. He's jumped over quite a few dudes, and that's honestly awesome. Very reliable, and just overall a really good player. He just never really worked on that route running and the footwork the way I wanted him to from Johnny Wilson, who I absolutely adore, and we'll talk about in just a second. But I think the little parts of the game, the more finer details, he's still working on. But I think he's going to make it. I think he's an instant wide receiver 2 on a team and can easily become the wide receiver 1. So big fan of him right there. I don't really feel like there's any factors that necessarily makes me need to regrade him. Like I feel like this is a pretty solid representation of how I feel. Again, that's what the it/ain't factors for, is something where I feel like my grading scale didn't do the right job. And most of the time I am pretty happy with it. Sometimes I really want to emphasize a point. So next we got Johnny Wilson. Call me crazy. It is what it is. I know. I'm a Johnny fanboy. It is what it is. I love him to death. 6'6", 231. Proved that he's a true wide receiver. He ran a 4.5. I thought this dude was 4.6. Like me, being the lover boy I am of Johnny Wilson. Pause. I am a straight male, just so y'all know. So we say this with love and profession, right? Johnny Wilson is someone who I've been extremely high on since the beginning. He was my wide receiver 2 coming into the year. I know. So when he played at 240 roughly, he did look like he was around that 4.6 weight. And I saw him in the Senior Bowl, really fluid athlete, but continues to drop balls. And I'm keeping his hands there at an F. I will keep it there until he proves me wrong. And, we've been in contact. We'll see if he can come on the show. But if Johnny fixes those hands issues, he's jumping up the board. He's someone at 6'6", 230, which is one phenomenal size. For someone who's running the 4.5s and has a similar 3-cone to Ricky Pearsall, who is 40 pounds lighter at 5 inches shorter, you can't discount that. That is rare movement ability. That is really rare movement ability. So, Johnny actually moves like a legitimate wide receiver. His route running is phenomenal. The thing is, his release package is phenomenal. He's great at getting proper positioning. And if he could catch at a consistent rate, we very well might see someone who is damn near unguardable. Call me a clown. I understand. But I genuinely have faith in Johnny Wilson. And he's a great blocker too. So maybe you can feed him some extra burritos if he doesn't end up working out as a wide receiver. And then you very well might have your next Darren Waller. But until then, I think he has a real shot at becoming a real wide receiver for a roster. Now, I'm even saying he's going below the majority of the guys that I've already talked about. But I think he'll be a day 2 pick. And I love the fact when you can have him be your YOLO target. I think that there is a market for that. Wrong way. We're going to pick number 5. Not pick number 5. Spot number 5. Wait, what? Brian Thomas was number 9 on your board. So he's the reason I have the it factor. I have the ain't factor for Troy Franklin, the it factor for Brian Thomas, because you know why? He is not really a finished product, but I could see it. I know he can perform. I see it with my eyes. I'm like, this guy is going to work. He has unbelievable athleticism. I didn't even have to change the speed. I knew he was that damn fast. He plays that fast. But when it comes to the route running, it's adequate, right? He has some very good routes there in the book, but it's still not fully polished. And the release package, I love my boy Marcus. I personally do not see the route running or the release intricacy. I don't see the variability in the release package, and it's still developing. Again, C+, adequate at the NFL level. But I'm talking about a true number one wide receiver on a team needs to have a very good release package, and I don't think he's there just yet. But there's not really anything that you can complain about with Brian Thomas. There's just things that you can nitpick, like you wish you were a little bit better of a route runner, a little bit more efficient of a route runner. Not better, a little bit more efficient. Like I feel like he could maintain the speed a little bit better through some certain cuts and maybe drop his hips a little bit more, because we've seen some of those routes where he does do a beautiful out route and leaves the defender in the dust. So, I mean, there's a lot to love about Brian Thomas. I don't really think he blocks as well as he should, but I didn't end up dropping him a point for that. You know, there's some great teams that are looking for him to come in day one as a pure wide receiver one, and I think he could perform that well in that role, but there's a point where it's like, I'm not fully comfortable with him stepping in and being the alpha day one. And he wasn't even the alpha there at LSU, but that's because the next guy that was the alpha on LSU is going to be a little bit higher on this list. Speaking of another really, really good receiver, we got Romo Dwan, another player where I have to give him a +2 in the it factor. Nobody gets a +3 in the it factor. Like, there has to be something wrong with my board, essentially, for there to be a +3 in the it factor. He's just an amazing red zone wide receiver. Technically, the +3 for the it factor ended up becoming my blocking grade. So you got that there as well. Romo Dwan is absolutely badass. He is a really, really good receiver. Very athletic. I mean, people thought he was going to run sub 4.4. I wasn't in that notion. I didn't see that on tape. I didn't see some very good separation on tape, but I think it's because he's still developing as a route runner. None of the Washington guys were really nuanced as route runners. They didn't have the real intricacy that I expected from how much hype that they got. Now, I think they're very good football players, but in terms of just holistically as a wide receiver, they have work to do. And Romo Dwan certainly is the best of the bunch, but he still has work to do. So I love to see how he's going to continue to do that in the NFL. And the thing is, in the red zone, there's not a better wide receiver in this class. And that might be the selling point for a team to take him over who will be above on this list. Like maybe Malik Nabers is there. You might say, I want those extra 3 inches and that extra 12 pounds. And, I want that red zone ability because this guy could be my alpha 1. I get that. And he's right outside that spot where he will be a number 1 wide receiver on a team day 1. But I don't think he's polished enough yet outside of the red zone for me to think he is the number 1 wide receiver on a team. Because I think he needs a little bit more mentorship, but easily can get to be a number 1. So overall, fantastic player. Again, he's the reason I put a blocking category in, because I wanted to give respect where respect is due. And that's a very forgotten part of the game. And Romo Dwan makes sure that we remembered it. So big shout out to Romo Dwan, great player. Next, we got A.D. Mitchell. Yeah. So A.D. Mitchell is wide receiver 4 coming in to the draft, or coming into the combine, and now he is number 3. I love A.D. Mitchell. He just ended up having a ridiculous combine, like 41 vert and 4.34 on the 40 at a 6'2", 205-pound frame. He was playing at 196. He added weight, 10 pounds, and he ended up testing like that. That's pretty awesome. I love that for him. So obviously he has everything that I talked about in the previous video where, talk about intricacy. He is one of the best route runners I've ever seen. He has unbelievable release packages, and his athleticism shows up on tape. It's just not consistent enough. I just said screw the consistency. I feel like there was something wrong there because Xavier Worthy didn't show that either. All of a sudden, these 2 receivers are absolutely combine monsters. So showing that they have the athleticism, and just maybe UT didn't use it properly. We'll see what happens in the NFL when it comes to that. But we know that A.D. Mitchell has, in my opinion, probably the highest ceiling out of any of these receivers in this class, because he has a true X build, and then he is tested like a ridiculous freak athletically. and he is really, really polished. So a ton of things to love for AD Mitchell right there. I do think he can improve on his blocking, but there's just nothing about him that I really don't like. And that's awesome. I do think that he sometimes might have a little bit of a motor issue. Same thing with Xavier Worthy, where they don't just put pedal to the metal. And I had that issue also with Marvin Harrison Jr., who we'll be talking about soon. But that's where the Terrace Marshall mentality comes in. I don't feel like on every route that they're actually running it to get open. Sometimes I feel like they're just running or they're just jogging it to say that they ran the route. So hoping that doesn't end up becoming an issue. I do think after the catch, he should be a little bit better. Like, I'm really wishing that he and Keon Coleman almost flipped their after the catch ability, because Keon Coleman was just so exciting with that, with some of those hurdles and stuff. And I think AD Mitchell easily could get there, but, I didn't see it as often as maybe I was hoping for. But great player, super reliable, one drop this past year, could truly be a true wide receiver one on a team. Now we got to the S tier, the tier one, the guys who are coming in and will be the number one receiver on their team. You got Malik Nabers. He didn't test out. He didn't measure. So we're leaving at 6 foot 200. Some people rumor that he's sub 6 foot. That could put him lower on people's boards if they're looking for that true alpha to Romo Odunze, because Rome is built like a true X wide receiver. So something definitely to note there. I don't really see it as an issue for myself, because I don't think that Malik Nabers, his strengths and weaknesses really pertain to his overall height. Like, he's going to get open. He has unbelievable speed. I mean, I think that he could have ran in the 4.2s as well. So I think that's perfectly fine. He is going to be extremely athletic. So we didn't even need to see the testing numbers, but I think he'll test at his pro day. I'm very excited for that. Like, my only issue with him is that he didn't block as well as I was expecting to. I mean, this dude's awesome after the catch too. I didn't see it translating to the NFL at the same rate, where in terms of like missed tackles, this dude is an absolute god after the catch. I'm still waiting to see that be like with my own eyes translatable to the NFL at that same rate. Still, I think he's going to be almost an elite weapon day one. Again, 80.75 grade. That is ridiculously good. If you're above a 70, that is really damn good. That's respectable. That is, you're getting starting reps. So again, got to emphasize that right there. But Malik Nabers is an awesome player. I think he's going to be an asset to whatever franchise he goes to. Maybe a little bit more role specific than we think if he is sub 6 foot, sub 200 pounds. But, you got guys like Garrett Wilson who are, he was 183 and he was at least he was similar height as well. And he's been an absolute weapon there for New York. So I think that there's a good chance Malik could still overcome those issues. So he's going to be a great player. I think it'd be a shame if people actually started trying to push Malik Nabers down boards. And then, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. is number one. Are you surprised? No, Marvin Harrison Jr. ended up getting back to an 81 overall grade. I had a love-hate relationship with Marvin, as I continued watching his tape and just not seeing the same guy I saw in 2022. But when you do end up looking at the tape, he is, tracking a little bit faster than, what I gave him credit for. And I'm really hoping it's a very similar to an AD Mitchell thing where, he actually runs faster than he was playing, because Ohio State, I don't know if I'd actually run full speed for Ohio State either last year. So I think that he's going to be a great player. Again, elite in the red zone. And I've seen so much more from him. I think he could end up being one of the best receivers in the NFL. Hence why I have him in the wide receiver 1 tier, because technically a tier 0 is like one of, if not the best wide receivers in the NFL. And I think he could reach that. So very excited for that. There's not really anything that's wrong with Marvin, except for the fact that I do think, he might have some motor concerns, because he really did show a massive difference in the effort that he used to play. And again, I don't fully blame him, hence why I didn't drop him in the it factor. But, I mean, I would probably play a little bit harder for CJ Stroud than Kyle McCord, too. That's going to be the video, though. This is a really stacked receiver class. Again, I cannot throw shade at any of the receivers I did not include on this list. It's just a really good receiving class. I just would rather highlight players than low-light others. So that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. I love y'all. See you on the far side. Peace.